Hey, welcome to our pastoral conversation here, Discovering More. I think I just built a playlist for all these conversations. I think I called it Discovering More. We hope that you can go back and check out where we've been and where we're going. But
we hope that you're discovering something.
Yeah.
There we go.
I'm discovering.
Okay.
So this past weekend, Mark, you talked a little bit about unanswered prayer. And I wanted to dive into that a little bit more because I think it's something that we all deal with a lot. My instruction on unanswered prayer came from Garth Brooks as a child.
Thank God for unanswered prayer. Yeah,
some of God's greatest gifts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our unanswered prayers. Yeah, music is theology, right? So, but you talked a little bit about that. So maybe just help us understand a little bit more, like what's going on when we have unanswered prayers.
Yeah, and I think that's such a challenging subject because, at least sometimes we won't know in this life. Certainly not in the short term, and then sometimes not even the long term, why God didn't grant that particular petition, especially when we know it's kind of aligned to His overall will, as we know about it from the Bible. And then, we don't receive it. And sometimes it's pretty clear, as in the Garth Brooks song, that God had something better in mind for us.
Yeah.
But sometimes I don't know that we'll know. And so we're still called then to trust, which is, it's a challenging sort of thing.
Yeah, and even, Jesus says, if you ask in my name, I will do it. So how does this work then when Jesus says we ask in His name, He's going to follow through for us, but then we don't experience what we're looking for.
Right. Yeah, and I think that sometimes it undermines faith altogether, which is particularly sad and damaging and so on. Sometimes it just leads people not to want to pray. Again, I think I expressed it in the message that hey, if God's going to do whatever He wants anyway, why should I bother? Mm-hmm. And that's to me where the two reasons that I gave in the message, and there are others, but just the whole relational side, that this is a part of our connection with God. And then the second part being this whole idea of prayer being a resource and weapon for the spiritual battle.
Yeah, Psalm 37 is one of those places that I like to go, especially in a conversation like this, because what it says there is it says, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. But what happens is our desires become informed by the delight of the Lord. So if we get them out of order,
right.
If our desires or our prayer requests become the primary mover in our lives, well, then we're never going to be happy because God becomes a tool for us to get what we want. But God is saying, and you talked about Hannah. I think this is what happened with Hannah, right? As she finally got to the place where she's like, God, I'm putting you first. And then whatever happens to me, and I'll trust you through it.
Right.
So delight yourself in the Lord. That has to be primary before we get the things we want, because otherwise, like I said, I think that God becomes a means to an end for us. God becomes a tool in our toolbox to end up just getting our will done.
Right. And I do think that our prayer, I don't know that we can have unanswered prayer even when we know it's very much aligned to God's overall purposes. Mm-hmm. I think of that prayer, thy kingdom come. And that to me is it's ultimately we're praying for Jesus to return, but I don't think that's the primary purpose of that petition. It's that God's kingdom purposes would be lived out.
Yeah.
In our individual lives, in His church, in the nations even. And then you think about how far short that this world is in that.
Right.
And so you think, well, should I keep praying that? And the answer to that to me is yes. Mm-hmm. Because you can see God's, you can see the progress of the gospel. You can see people coming to faith. And these days, I like to read about what's going on in other parts of the world because it's not so clear here sometimes in the United States.
Yeah.
But the fact that the church continues to expand and people's lives continue to be changed.
Yeah, and you also shared that line about asking our Heavenly Father as a dear child asks their dear Father. And to me, like my kids, they are relentless if there's something they want.
Yes.
Can I have this? No. Please? No. Please? No. Why not? Now can I have it? And they don't get discouraged or disheartened, or they don't necessarily even feel alienated by my no. They just keep coming back, and eventually, even I can even explain, like, this is why I'm saying no, and it doesn't necessarily move their heart. They still may ask again later, for something. So, but when we frame it in that way, I think oftentimes as adults and when we're going to God, we kind of see that we have, like, it's almost like we're asking a boss. It's got to make it into the budget, right? Can this please make it into the budget? And the boss is like, no, it's not. You're like, oh, okay, I'm done going to him. But like, why would we stop going to God when He's our loving Father? He cares more about us than anything else, than anything we can care about. So I thought that was a helpful picture you gave this weekend too.
Yeah, the story that you just gave reminded me of my two youngest sons, and they were here at church. And my middle son, Phil, he comes into the office and tells his brother, "She said no." To which he responds with, "You got to know how to talk to her." And then goes back and talks to Lynette, and she comes back and says, "She said yes." Now, I don't actually think that it works with God exactly that way. We have to know the right words or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's a sense of persistence, and that we keep asking, and we trust that He's going to respond ultimately in what's best for us.
Yeah, maybe if I could end with one final encouragement, it would be to say, whatever you're experiencing in your prayer life, if you're experiencing some no's from God or some unanswered prayers, use it as an opportunity to dive more into communion and more into union with God, more into delighting yourself in Him, and see this as an opportunity. We're going to talk about fasting in a couple weeks too, but see it as an opportunity where your lack drives you even closer to the Lord who loves you. So I hope this is helpful to you in your spiritual walk, and we look forward to the next one.
Have a great week of praying.